Listen carefully. Willpower is not a gift, a mood, or a personality trait. It is a muscle, and right now, whether you realize it or not, you are either training it or letting it decay. Every time you obey distraction, delay discomfort, or wait for motivation, you make yourself weaker. Every time you act despite resistance, you make yourself stronger. This audiobook is about one thing: building a mind that moves on command, not on emotion. Because the person who controls their actions controls their future. Chapter 1. Stop waiting to feel ready. Stop waiting. That is where this begins. Not with a better mood. Not with a better plan. Not with a cleaner calendar, a more inspiring Monday, or a perfect burst of motivation. It begins the moment you stop worshiping readiness and start respecting action. Because readiness is one of the most dangerous lies ever sold to weak minds. People say, "I'm getting ready." They say, "I just need a little more time." They say, "I want to start strong." No. What they usually mean is this: "I am afraid, and I want to delay the moment I must prove myself." That's the truth. Readiness is often fear in a nicer outfit. It sounds responsible. It sounds thoughtful. It sounds mature. But in most cases, it is just resistance dressed up to look intelligent. You have a choice. You can keep waiting to feel ready. Or you can build strength by moving before you feel ready. That's the key. Most lives are not destroyed by one catastrophic decision. They are drained away in the waiting room of one more day. One more day before the gym. One more day before the application. One more day before the phone call. One more day before the conversation. One more day before the first video, the first page, the first sale, the first step. And suddenly, years are gone. Look at the person who says they will start getting in shape on Monday. Monday comes. They are tired. They say next Monday. The next Monday comes. Something unexpected happens. They say next month. Then a season passes. Then a year passes. Then they look in the mirror and wonder why nothing changed. Nothing changed because they kept asking emotion for permission. You don't need their permission. And you do not need your feelings' permission either. You do not need readiness. You need movement. Read that again in your mind. You do not need readiness. You need movement. The entrepreneur does the same thing. He says he is building the business. But what is he really doing? Researching logos. Watching videos. Reading threads. Comparing tools. Making notes. Organizing ideas. Talking about strategy. He is busy, but he is not moving. He is circling the work, not doing the work. He is preparing to begin instead of beginning. And because he never enters the arena, he never gets real feedback. No rejection. No correction. No growth. Just endless preparation. Endless false progress. The student does it too. They buy highlighters. They clean the desk. They arrange the notes. They build a study playlist. They make a schedule so beautiful it looks worthy of a frame. But they do not study. They organize the appearance of discipline while avoiding the pain of discipline. That is the trap. It's not about planning. It's about obedience. It's not about intention. It's about execution. It's not about readiness. It's about discipline. You have a choice. You can keep building a fantasy version of your future self, the one who will someday feel confident, energized, focused, and unstoppable. Or you can accept reality. The real version of you, the one that wins, starts tired, starts uncertain, starts clumsy, starts before confidence arrives. Start ugly, start small, but start now. That phrase matters because too many people think a powerful life begins with a powerful beginning. It doesn't. It begins with an honest one. Maybe your first workout is weak. Fine. Do it anyway. Maybe your first sales call is awkward. Fine. Make it anyway. Maybe your first page is sloppy. Fine. Write it anyway. You are not trying to impress anyone in the beginning. You are trying to build command over yourself. That's the key. Action creates emotional momentum, not the other way around. Most people think they need to feel motivated first. Wrong. Motivation often arrives after movement, not before it. You clean one corner of the room, and suddenly you want to clean more. You study for 10 minutes, and suddenly your focus begins to wake up. You put on your shoes and walk outside, and suddenly the workout feels possible. You write one paragraph, and suddenly the next sentence comes easier. Motion first, mood later. That is how it works in the real world. The mind loves evidence. And every time you act, especially when you do not feel like acting, you give your mind new evidence. Evidence that you are not helpless. Evidence that your excuses are not in charge. Evidence that your word still means something. That is how self-trust is rebuilt. Not through affirmations. Not through speeches. Not through imagining a better future. Through proof. Small proof. Repeated proof. Daily proof. You said you would wake up and walk for 10 minutes. Then do it. You said you would read 5 pages. Then do it. You said you would send the email, make the list, cook the meal, finish the task. Then do it. Every completed action says, I can trust myself. Every delayed action says, my moods control me. You have a choice. And here is where people get confused. They think hesitation means they are being careful. Sometimes, yes. But often, hesitation is not wisdom. It is fear asking for more time. Fear says, wait until you know more. Fear says, wait until the timing is better. Fear says, wait until you feel confident. Fear says, wait until it becomes easier. But difficulty does not disappear because you delayed. Most of the time, it grows. The call gets harder. The task gets heavier. The habit gets colder. The shame gets louder. So stop calling hesitation caution when it is really avoidance. That's the key. The goal is not to eliminate fear before you act. The goal is to act while fear is still present. That is what training your willpower actually looks like. Not feeling no resistance, but refusing to bow to resistance. You don't need their permission. You don't need the perfect moment. You don't need a dramatic breakthrough. You need one clean decision. I move now. Start ugly, start small, but start now. Here is the practical instruction. Shrink the target. Remove the drama. Execute the first rep. If the workout feels too hard, do 10 minutes. If the project feels too big, do the first block. If the book feels overwhelming, read 2 pages. If the conversation scares you, send the first message. If the business feels uncertain, make the first offer. Do not wait to feel brave. Behave bravely first. That is how courage is built. That is how discipline is built. That is how willpower is built. Not in theory, in action. And once you begin, do not ask, how do I feel? Ask, what is the next step? Then take it. Then take the next one. Then take the next one. Motion first. Mood later. Say it until it becomes part of your nervous system. Motion first. Mood later. Motion first. Mood later. Motion first. Mood later. Because the person who learns to move without waiting becomes very hard to stop. That is what this chapter is about. Killing the fantasy that you need to be ready before you begin. You don't. You need movement. You need obedience. You need reps. The door opens after you push, not before. You do not need readiness. You need movement. Remember that. The strongest people are not the ones who always feel prepared. They are the ones who have trained themselves to begin anyway. They understand that confidence is earned after action, not granted before it. They know that hesitation weakens, but motion strengthens. They know that every time they move on command, their willpower grows a little stronger. That is the theme of this entire book. You stop waiting. You start training. You broke the addiction to readiness. Now let's attack the addiction that keeps most people soft. Chapter 2. Your comfort is making you weak. Comfort is not harmless. That is where we begin. Most people think comfort is a reward. Something innocent. Something earned. A soft bed. An easier choice. A little escape. A little delay. A little more scrolling. A little more rest. A little less effort. But comfort has a cost. And if you are not paying attention, it will quietly take your edge, your courage, your discipline, and your self-respect without ever announcing the theft. Comfort weakens what hardship strengthens. That is not poetry. That is reality. The bed feels good in the morning, so you stay in it. Not because you need sleep, but because getting up feels unpleasant. 1 extra minute becomes 10. 10 becomes 30. Then the whole morning is gone. And what did you really train? Not recovery. Not wisdom. You trained obedience to ease. That's the key. The action matters. But the deeper issue is what the action teaches your mind. Every time you choose comfort over command, you send a message to yourself. The message is simple. My preferences lead. My standards follow. That is how weakness is built. Slowly, quietly, repeatedly. You have a choice. You can keep treating comfort like a small thing, or you can finally understand what it is doing to your life. Look at how many people reach for their phones the second silence appears. Why? Because silence feels uncomfortable. Stillness feels uncomfortable. Being alone with their own thoughts feels uncomfortable. So they scroll. They refresh. They consume noise. Not because it helps them, because it protects them from discomfort. And each time they do it, their tolerance for stillness gets weaker. Then they wonder why they cannot focus. They wonder why reading feels hard. Why prayer feels hard. Why deep work feels hard. Why reflection feels hard. Why 10 quiet minutes feels unbearable. Because they trained themselves to flee the slightest friction. Comfort weakens what hardship strengthens. The person quits a task the moment it becomes boring. That is another form of comfort addiction. They can start with excitement. They can begin with intensity. But the second the task becomes repetitive, slow, unglamorous, or mentally heavy, they back away. They say they need a break. They say they need fresh inspiration. They say they will come back later. Usually, they do not come back stronger. They come back softer. Because the mind adapts to what you repeatedly allow. That's the key. Your brain gets addicted to ease quickly. Faster than most people realize. Give it instant pleasure, constant escape, and zero resistance, and soon even normal effort feels like a threat. Not because the effort is extreme. Because your tolerance has dropped. You used to be able to sit with a problem. Now you need stimulation every few minutes. You used to be able to push through boredom. Now you call boredom burnout. You used to be able to face discomfort directly. Now you need something soft, fast, or easy to numb it. You have a choice. You can keep reducing your life to whatever feels pleasant in the moment. Or you can train yourself to become bigger than the moment. Because this chapter is not saying pain is noble. Pain is not the point. Suffering for the sake of suffering is not wisdom. Misery is not maturity. You do not get stronger by performing struggle like a costume. It's not about pain. It's about discipline. It's not about punishment. It's about command. It's not about proving toughness. It's about building endurance. That's the key. Voluntary discomfort is useful because it gives you back authority over yourself. When you get out of a warm bed on time, you are not just waking up. You are practicing self-command. When you take the cold morning walk, finish the hard set, keep the promise, tell the truth in the difficult conversation, or refuse the cheap pleasure that would weaken your focus, you are not punishing yourself. You are training reps for character. That is what most people fail to understand. A strict routine is not a prison. It is a gym for the will. Delayed gratification is not deprivation. It is strength training for impulse control. A difficult conversation is not a nuisance. It is practice in courage. A boring task finished well is not meaningless. It is evidence that you can be trusted by yourself. Choose your hard before life chooses it for you. Say that again in your mind. Choose your hard before life chooses it for you. Because life will absolutely bring difficulty. That part is guaranteed. Pressure will come. Loss will come. Chaos will come. Rejection will come. Fatigue will come. Uncertainty will come. And if you have trained only for comfort, pressure will feel like destruction. But if you have trained through voluntary hardship, pressure will feel familiar. That's the key. You do not rise to the level of your wishes. You fall to the level of your conditioning. So what are you conditioning right now? Are you conditioning instant escape? Are you conditioning convenience? Are you conditioning softness? Are you conditioning the habit of quitting whenever something stops feeling good? Or are you conditioning steadiness? Because the person who always chooses comfort becomes fragile. Very fragile. They need the room to be right. The mood to be right. The people to be right. The timing to be right. The energy to be right. And when life stops cooperating, they collapse. But the person who practices discomfort on purpose becomes stable. They can function in imperfect conditions. They can stay calm when things are inconvenient. They can work while tired. They can focus while bored. They can speak while nervous. They can continue while uncomfortable. Make discomfort familiar, and you become dangerous. Dangerous not to others. Dangerous to your old weakness. Dangerous to delay. Dangerous to excuses. Dangerous to the habits that used to control you. You don't need their permission. You do not need comfort's permission either. You do not need every task to feel good. You do not need every morning to feel easy. You do not need the mind to agree with the mission. You need standards. And here is the practical part. Start building discomfort into your life on purpose. Not recklessly. Not theatrically. Deliberately. Wake up when you said you would, especially when the bed argues back. Sit in silence for 10 minutes without touching your phone. Finish one boring task without escape. Take the stairs. Go for the walk in bad weather. Hold eye contact in the difficult conversation. Delay the snack. Delay the purchase. Delay the reaction. Do one thing each day that your weaker self would avoid. That is training. And the point is not the activity itself. The point is the signal you are sending to your nervous system. I can handle discomfort. I do not panic when something feels hard. I do not run just because something feels unpleasant. I stay. That's the key. Pressure stops feeling like danger when discomfort stops being foreign. Most people are not destroyed by extreme hardship. They are worn down by low tolerance. Tiny inconveniences become emotional events. Small frustrations become excuses. Ordinary effort becomes unbearable. Fix the tolerance and you change the life. It's not about comfort. It's about capacity. It's not about ease. It's about resilience. It's not about what feels good. It's about what makes you stronger. You have a choice. You can keep building a life around immediate relief. Or you can build a life around long-term strength. One path feels good now and costs you later. The other feels hard now and serves you later. Choose your hard before life chooses it for you. That phrase matters because every person chooses hardship one way or another. The disciplined person chooses the hardship of training, restraint, honesty, and consistency. The undisciplined person chooses the hardship of regret, dependence, avoidance, and decline. Both are hard. But only one kind of hard builds you. Comfort weakens what hardship strengthens. Never forget that. The more you worship ease, the less capable you become. The more you practice controlled discomfort, the more power you recover. You stop being ruled by moods. You stop being dominated by convenience. You stop treating every difficult moment like an emergency. You become harder to break. And that is the deeper lesson of this book. Willpower is not built by talking about strength. It is built by repeatedly choosing what strengthens you over what soothes you. Make discomfort familiar, and you become dangerous. You stopped waiting to feel ready. Good. Now it is time to stop rearranging your life around comfort. Because the next enemy is even more subtle. It hides inside your own thoughts. Chapter 3. Do the hard thing first. Most people do not fail because they are lazy. They fail because they are avoidant. That is the truth. They are busy. They are active. They are moving all day. But they are not moving toward the thing that matters most. They are moving around it. They are circling it, delaying it, decorating their avoidance with productivity. That's the key. Avoidance rarely looks like doing nothing. It usually looks like doing everything except the one thing that would actually change your life. You answer emails before you write. You clean the kitchen before you make the call. You organize your notes before you study the material. You tweak the website before you sell the offer. You research for 3 more hours before you publish. You create a plan so detailed it becomes a hiding place. And all of it feels justified. That is why avoidance is dangerous. It does not always feel weak. Sometimes it feels responsible. Sometimes it feels efficient. Sometimes it feels smart. But if you are using easy tasks to avoid the hard one, then you are not being productive. You are being controlled. You have a choice. You can keep arranging your day around your comfort. Or you can arrange it around your growth. Hit resistance first. That phrase matters because the first battle of the day sets the tone for every battle that follows. If the first thing you do is obey distraction, your mind notices. If the first thing you do is postpone difficulty, your mind notices. If the first thing you do is surrender the mission for something easier, your mind notices. And once that pattern is set, the rest of the day becomes heavier. Why? Because now you are carrying 2 burdens. The original task, and the knowledge that you already betrayed yourself once. That's the key. Weakness compounds. 1 delay becomes 2. 2 delays become a habit. A habit becomes an identity. And suddenly you are the kind of person who is always about to begin. But the reverse is also true. Strength compounds. If you face difficulty early, you gain something most people never build: evidence. Evidence that you can lead yourself. Evidence that you are stronger than your preferences. Evidence that resistance can show up and still lose. Win the morning battle, and the mind falls in line. That is not a motivational slogan. That is nervous system training. Your mind is always watching what you do first. Do you check your phone first? Then you teach your mind that reaction comes before intention. Do you wander into low-value tasks first? Then you teach your mind that avoidance is allowed. Do you hit the hard thing first? Then you teach your mind something powerful. We do not run here. We attack. You don't need their permission. You do not need your fear's permission either. The athlete understands this. That is why the serious ones train before dawn. Not because dawn is magical. Because discipline is clearest before the world starts negotiating with you. Before the texts. Before the noise. Before the excuses gather momentum. Before the lazy part of the mind has time to build a legal case against effort. They get up and train. And every time they do, they build more than muscle. They build authority. The leader understands this too. The strongest leaders do not spend the whole morning hiding in minor tasks while the real issue waits in the background. They handle the hardest decision before noon. They make the difficult call. They address the problem. They face the conflict. Why? Because unresolved difficulty drains energy. It leaks focus. It poisons the rest of the day. Ordinary people can live this way too. You do not need to be an athlete. You do not need to be a CEO. You do not need a dramatic life. You just need honesty. What is the thing you are avoiding? Not the thing you say is important. The thing you are actively dodging. That's the key. There is almost always one task in your day that carries more weight than the others. One conversation. One workout. One paragraph. One application. One sales call. One decision. 1 hour of focused work. One act of courage. And if you keep doing lesser things first, you stay trapped in lesser results. It's not about busyness. It's about priority. It's not about effort. It's about direction. It's not about doing more. It's about doing what matters before your weakness interferes. Hit resistance first. Fear shrinks when faced directly. That is one of the great hidden laws of discipline. The call feels terrifying before you dial. Less terrifying once it begins. The workout feels unbearable before you start. Less unbearable after 10 minutes. The page feels impossible before you write. Less impossible after the first paragraph. The conversation feels overwhelming before you speak. Less overwhelming once truth enters the room. But if you avoid the thing, fear grows in the dark. You imagine it. You exaggerate it. You delay it. You give it importance it does not deserve. Then the task becomes psychologically larger than it really is. That is why so many people stay weak. Not because the task is impossible. Because they let avoidance inflate it into something mythical. Do first what weak people avoid. Say that to yourself. Do first what weak people avoid. Because the order matters. You cannot build a strong life on a weak sequence. If your sequence is distraction first, comfort second, courage later, then courage rarely comes. But if your sequence is courage first, then discipline gets easier. Not easy. Easier. That's the key. The early win changes your posture. Once you have already done the hard thing, the rest of the day no longer feels like a chase. It feels like reinforcement. You are no longer trying to recover from avoidance. You are building on momentum. And momentum matters. Action creates confidence. Execution creates clarity. Completion creates energy. You have a choice. You can spend the first half of your day hiding from the task and the second half feeling guilty about it. Or you can face it early and spend the rest of the day with a cleaner mind. Here is the behavioral instruction. Every night, identify tomorrow's hardest meaningful task. Not the most urgent noise. The most meaningful resistance. Write it down clearly. Then do 3 things. First, make it visible. Put it where you cannot pretend you forgot. Second, reduce the entry barrier. Set out the clothes. Open the document. Prepare the materials. Draft the first line. Remove friction. Third, protect the first block of the day. No phone. No random email. No low-value chores. No drifting. Go straight to the resistance. Hit resistance first. Maybe it is 20 minutes of writing. Maybe it is making the sales call. Maybe it is opening the spreadsheet. Maybe it is sitting in silence long enough to think clearly. Maybe it is training your body before the excuses wake up. Do not ask how you feel. Ask what leads. That's the key. Your standards must lead, not your moods. And do not make the mistake of thinking this chapter is only about mornings. Morning is ideal because it reveals you clearly. But the deeper principle is this: in any block of life, lead with courage. Lead with truth. Lead with difficulty. Stop making the hard thing wait at the back of the line while lesser things pretend to matter. Do first what weak people avoid. That is how self-respect is built. Not by talking tough. By sequencing your life correctly. When you attack the thing you dread, you prove that discomfort is not your master. You prove that fear can exist without becoming your leader. You prove that your willpower is not theoretical. It is operational. It works under pressure. And that is the entire theme of this book. You are training a mind that acts on command. Not eventually. Not when convenient. Not after 10 acts of avoidance. On command. Win the morning battle, and the mind falls in line. Remember that. The first victory is never just one victory. It is a signal. A standard. A declaration of who is in charge. You stopped waiting to feel ready. You stopped worshipping comfort. Now you are learning to strike resistance before it spreads. Good. Because the next enemy is even closer. It is not in your schedule. It is in your self-talk. Chapter 4. Kill the habit of negotiating with yourself. Most people are not defeated by life. They are defeated by conversation. Internal conversation. Private bargaining. Quiet excuses. Small emotional deals made in the dark. Not with other people. With themselves. That is where the collapse begins. Not when you fail once. Not when life gets hard. Not when you feel tired. It begins when you start negotiating with weakness as if weakness deserves a vote. I'll do it later. Just this once. I deserve a break. I'll start tomorrow. I've had a long day. I'm not in the right headspace. I can miss one. That language sounds harmless. It is not harmless. It is the language of self-betrayal. Every negotiation with weakness makes weakness louder. That's the key. Weakness grows when it is consulted. The moment you sit down and debate whether you should keep your word, you have already stepped into dangerous territory. Because weakness does not need a good argument. It only needs an opening. And most people give it one every day. You said you would wake up at 6. The alarm goes off. Immediately, the courtroom begins. You slept late. You need recovery. Tomorrow will be better. Today is different. No. Today is not different. Today is revealing. The negotiation is revealing who is in charge. You have a choice. You can obey the standard, or you can obey the excuse. And every time you choose the excuse, you reinforce a pattern far more damaging than one missed wake-up time or one skipped workout. You teach your brain that your commands are optional. That's the real problem. It's not about one missed action. It's about broken authority. It's not about one weak moment. It's about repeated surrender. It's not about fatigue. It's about discipline. Every negotiation with weakness makes weakness louder. Say that to yourself again. Because once the mind learns that your rules can be bent by emotion, it starts testing every rule. You said you would train today. Maybe later. You said you would save money. Just this once. You said you would focus. Check the phone first. You said you would tell the truth. Avoid the conversation. You said you would finish the task. Take a break now. At first, these compromises seem small. But the mind is always learning. It learns from repetition. It learns from loopholes. It learns from what you tolerate. And when compromise becomes familiar, self-command becomes weak. Break enough promises to yourself, and you stop believing yourself. That sentence should hit hard. Because that is exactly what happens. You stop trusting your own plans. You stop respecting your own goals. You stop taking your own intentions seriously. Why? Because your history is speaking. You have told yourself too many times that you would begin, continue, finish, or endure, and then you did not. So now, even when you make a sincere promise, something inside you doubts it. That is self-respect collapsing from the inside. Not because you are incapable. Because you have trained yourself not to listen to yourself. That's the key. The damage is deeper than missed results. It is identity damage. A person who cannot trust their own word becomes hesitant in every area of life. They make goals without conviction. They build plans without belief. They speak with ambition but move with doubt. They keep looking for more motivation, more hacks, more inspiration, when the real issue is simple. Their inner command structure is broken. You don't need their permission. You do not even need your emotions' permission. You need to restore law inside your own mind. And law begins where negotiation ends. Let's be honest. Most people talk about discipline as if it is some dramatic act of toughness. It is not. Often, discipline is just refusing to reopen decisions that were already made. You decided to wake at 6. Then wake at 6. You decided to train at 5. Then train at 5. You decided not to text them back. Then do not text them back. You decided to save the money. Then save the money. You decided to finish the work before entertainment. Then finish the work before entertainment. Decide once. Obey often. That is how strong people live. Not because they never feel resistance. They do. But they do not treat resistance like authority. They feel the emotion, hear the excuse, and follow the standard anyway. That's the key. A non-negotiable standard is a gift to your future self. It removes friction. It removes debate. It removes the daily draining question of, do I feel like it? Strong routines are powerful because they make obedience automatic. A fixed wake time. A fixed workout window. A fixed hour for deep work. A fixed rule that priority comes before preference. A fixed rule that the phone does not get the first hour of the day. These are not restrictions. They are reinforcements. It's not about rigidity. It's about reliability. It's not about control for control's sake. It's about self-respect. It's not about perfection. It's about discipline. And let me be clear. This chapter is not telling you to become robotic. It is telling you to stop becoming weak through constant emotional consultation. You have a choice. You can build your life around whatever you feel in the moment. Or you can build your life around what you decided matters. Only one of those paths creates strength. Only one creates trust. Only one creates a will that actually works under pressure. Here is the practical instruction. Start identifying your most dangerous negotiation phrases. Write them down. Later. Tomorrow. Just this once. I deserve this. I'll make up for it. It's not a big deal. These are not harmless sentences. They are breach points. They are the exact places where your standards get ambushed. Once you know your phrases, cut them off faster. Do not let the debate run. When the alarm rings, move. When the workout time comes, begin. When the work block starts, sit down. When the hard conversation must happen, speak. Do not let weakness build a case. Every extra second of debate gives the lower part of you more room to win. That's the key. Action is often easier than negotiation. But people choose negotiation because it gives the illusion of control while preserving comfort. Stop doing that. Replace internal debate with pre-made rules. I wake up when the alarm rings. I train at this time. I do priority work before entertainment. I do not buy what I did not plan to buy. I do not break promises casually. Simple, clear, repeatable. Decide once. Obey often. And when you fail, because at times you will, do not respond with shame theater. Respond with correction. Shame without correction is just another form of indulgence. See the breach. Fix the breach. Tighten the standard. Move on. What matters is that your mind begins seeing a new pattern. When I say something, I mean it. That is how belief returns. Not through positive thinking. Through consistent proof. Break enough promises to yourself, and you stop believing yourself. But keep enough promises to yourself, and something powerful happens. Your posture changes. Your speech changes. Your energy changes. Your standards stop sounding like wishes and start sounding like commands. You become simpler inside. Less noise. Less bargaining. Less collapse. Because now there is a chain of command. And that is what this whole book is building. A mind that can issue an order and follow through. A mind that does not kneel every time comfort speaks. A mind that does not reopen decisions just because emotion gets loud. Every negotiation with weakness makes weakness louder. Remember that. Each time you refuse the bargain, you weaken the old pattern. Each time you obey the standard, you strengthen the new one. Over time, the voice of compromise gets quieter because it stops being rewarded. That is how willpower grows. Not just by doing hard things, but by ending the habit of treating your own word like a suggestion. You stopped waiting to feel ready. You stopped worshiping comfort. You learned to hit resistance first. Now you are cutting off the inner bargaining that keeps people soft from the inside out. Good. Because the next step is bigger than behavior. It is identity. Chapter 5. Build identity through repetition. Willpower gets stronger when it stops being a performance. That is where this chapter begins. Most people try to build discipline through emotion. They get inspired. They make a promise. They declare a new version of themselves. They say, "This is it. This time I'm serious." Then a few days pass. The feeling fades. The pressure returns. The old habits speak. And suddenly the new identity disappears. Why? Because it was never an identity. It was a mood. That's the key. A real identity is not something you announce once. It is something you prove repeatedly. You become what you repeat. Say that clearly in your mind. You become what you repeat. Not what you intend. Not what you admire. Not what you post about. Not what you say you want. What you repeat. That is why so many people stay trapped. They are trying to think their way into a new life when they need to act their way into one. They keep saying, "I'm trying to be more disciplined." That sounds humble. It sounds honest. But it is weak language if it becomes permanent. Trying is vague. Identity is concrete. I'm trying to be disciplined. No. I am a person who finishes what I start. That is different. Not because the sentence is magical. Because the standard is sharper. One is a wish. The other is a direction. You have a choice. You can keep describing yourself by your struggles. Or you can start defining yourself by the actions you are willing to repeat. That's the key. Willpower is strongest when it is attached to who you are, not just what you want. Because goals come and go. Outcomes rise and fall. Results are delayed. Progress is uneven. But identity holds. Identity keeps moving when applause disappears. Identity keeps showing up when motivation dies. The writer who writes every day becomes a writer. Not when the book is published. Not when the followers arrive. Not when the income appears. When the writing becomes repeated behavior. A runner who runs only when the weather is pleasant is not building identity. They are following convenience. But the runner who runs in bad weather, who runs when it is cold, who runs when it is boring, who runs when no one is watching, that person becomes resilient. Why? Because repetition is self-creation. The parent who stays calm under stress becomes steady. Not because they once handled one hard moment well. Because they keep returning to restraint. They keep choosing composure instead of chaos. They keep practicing patience when irritation would be easier. That is identity. Not one emotional victory. Repeated evidence. You don't need their permission. You do not need outside recognition to become someone new. You do not need applause to be disciplined. You do not need a title to be committed. You do not need public proof before private proof. You need reps. Repetition is self-creation. That phrase matters because people talk about identity as if it is hidden somewhere deep inside, waiting to be discovered. In many cases, identity is not discovered. It is built. Day by day. Action by action. Choice by choice. You build it by what you normalize. If you normalize quitting, you become a quitter. If you normalize delay, you become delayed. If you normalize finishing, you become dependable. If you normalize training, you become strong. If you normalize truth, you become trustworthy. It's not about labels. It's about repetition. It's not about self-image. It's about discipline. It's not about what sounds good. It's about what gets repeated. That's the key. Every small act casts a vote for the person you are becoming. People underestimate small acts because they worship dramatic change. They think transformation has to feel heroic. It does not. Most real transformation is quiet, repetitive, almost boring. You wake up on time. That is a vote. You do the workout. That is a vote. You keep your word. That is a vote. You put the phone away. That is a vote. You finish the task. That is a vote. You tell the truth in the hard moment. That is a vote. And then the votes begin to stack. That is how the mind changes. Not in one grand emotional breakthrough. In accumulated proof. One action will not define you, but repeated action will. Remember that. One missed day does not make you weak. One strong day does not make you disciplined. People get lost because they overreact to isolated moments. They make one mistake and decide they are broken. Or they make one good choice and decide they have arrived. No. Identity is built on patterns. That's the key. Missed reps matter. Of course they matter. They interrupt momentum. They expose weakness. They reveal where your standards are still soft. But completed reps matter more, because repetition has force. Repetition has weight. Repetition slowly bends the self. The person who keeps showing up becomes someone who shows up. Read that again in your mind. The person who keeps showing up becomes someone who shows up. At first, discipline feels forced, unnatural, heavy. You have to push. You have to remember. You have to resist. But over time, something changes. The repeated act becomes familiar. The familiar act becomes normal. And what once felt hard now feels like part of your character. That is one of the greatest rewards of disciplined repetition. It stops feeling like performance and starts feeling like identity. You have a choice. You can keep acting like discipline is something you visit occasionally. or you can make it part of who you are. That is how willpower becomes durable. Because when discipline is only tied to outcomes, it vanishes when outcomes are delayed. But when discipline is tied to identity, you keep going. You say, "This is what I do. This is who I am." Not because it is easy, because it is yours. And here is the practical instruction. Stop speaking about the future version of you as if that person will appear without repetition. That future self is being built now. Ask better questions. Not, "What do I feel like doing?" Ask, "What would the disciplined version of me repeat today?" Not, "How do I reinvent my life overnight?" Ask, "What behavior do I need to make normal?" Not, "How do I become confident?" Ask, "What repeated act would make confidence deserved?" That's the key. Reduce identity to behaviors you can actually perform. If you want to be a reader, read daily. If you want to be strong, train consistently. If you want to be calm, practice restraint under pressure. If you want to be focused, protect your attention repeatedly. If you want to be reliable, keep small promises first. Do not wait for the identity to arrive before the action. Let the action carve the identity. You become what you repeat. And be careful what you repeat in secret. Because private repetition becomes public character. The little lie repeated becomes a dishonest person. The small delay repeated becomes an unreliable person. The silent resentment repeated becomes a bitter person. The private discipline repeated becomes a powerful person. Character is not built only in big moments. It is built in ordinary moments that get repeated until they become automatic. That is why consistency matters more than intensity. A single heroic effort can inspire you, but repeated effort recreates you. Repetition is self-creation. Never forget that. It means you are not trapped by your past. But it also means you are not rescued by your intentions. The old identity fades only when the new one is rehearsed enough times to become stronger than the old one. That takes reps. That takes patience. That takes obedience. One action will not define you, but repeated action will. So stop looking for a dramatic identity shift. Build one. Quietly. Ruthlessly. Repeatedly. Let every day cast votes in the same direction until discipline stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like your nature. That is the theme of this entire book. Willpower is not just about forcing behavior. It is about becoming the kind of person whose behavior can be trusted. A person whose standards are repeated so often they become character. A person whose actions say the same thing over and over, until the mind finally accepts the truth. This is who I am. You have stopped waiting. You have faced discomfort. You have learned to attack resistance and end negotiation. Now you are building identity through repetition. Good. But there is a modern enemy waiting to sabotage all of it if you let it. It steals attention, weakens focus, and makes discipline feel harder than it needs to be. Chapter 6. Protect your mind from cheap dopamine. Your mind is being trained every day. That is where this chapter begins. Not someday. Not in theory. Right now. Every scroll trains it. Every click trains it. Every impulse trains it. Every escape trains it. And if you are not careful, you will build a mind that cannot stay with anything difficult long enough to change your life. That is the danger. Distraction is not a small problem anymore. It is one of the great destroyers of willpower in modern life. Not because it looks dramatic. Because it looks normal. It hides inside habits that everybody excuses. A few quick checks. A little background noise. A few videos. A little entertainment between tasks. A reward before the work is done. A phone in the hand every time thought gets heavy. And slowly, silently, your tolerance for effort collapses. What you feed grows stronger. That's the key. If you feed distraction, distraction grows stronger. If you feed impatience, impatience grows stronger. If you feed impulse, impulse grows stronger. If you feed focus, focus grows stronger. Your brain adapts to what you repeatedly give it. That is why constant stimulation is so dangerous. It teaches the mind to expect novelty every few seconds. It conditions you to crave movement, color, sound, surprise, reward. Then when you sit down to do deep work, study, train, write, think, pray, or build something real, the silence feels unbearable. Not because the work is impossible. Because your mind has been overfed on garbage. You have a choice. You can keep feeding your mind speed, noise, and cheap pleasure. Or you can train it to tolerate depth again. Because the truth is simple. Cheap pleasure steals the desire for meaningful work. It does this by making meaningful work feel too slow. That's the key. Meaningful work has friction. It asks for patience. It asks for focus. It asks you to stay with one thing longer than your impulses want. It does not reward you every 15 seconds. It does not entertain you on the way in. It often feels dull before it feels powerful. But if your mind is addicted to instant reward, then meaningful work feels wrong. You start checking your phone in the middle of tasks. You start switching tabs every few minutes. You start looking for stimulation instead of staying with the process. You start binge-watching instead of building. You start consuming other people's lives instead of constructing your own. Easy pleasure makes hard progress feel impossible. Read that again in your mind. Easy pleasure makes hard progress feel impossible. This is not because you are lazy by nature. It is because you have trained a reward system that now rebels against anything earned slowly. You sit down to write, and your hand wants the phone. You sit down to study, and your mind wants novelty. You sit down in silence, and your body wants escape. You face stress, and entertainment starts calling your name. That is not freedom. That is conditioning. You don't need their permission. You do not need your cravings' permission either. You do not need to obey every urge just because it appears. You do not need to consume because the world is offering. You do not need to anesthetize every quiet moment with noise. You need to protect your mind. Because attention is not just a resource. It is the front door to your future. Whatever captures your attention begins shaping your life. What you feed grows stronger. The person who checks the phone every few minutes is not just breaking concentration. They are rehearsing fragmentation. They are teaching the brain, over and over, stay shallow. Stay restless. Stay externally controlled. Then they wonder why long reading feels hard. Why prayer feels dry. Why work feels exhausting. Why stillness feels threatening. Why boredom feels like pain. Because they have not trained their mind to remain. They have trained it to escape. That's the key. Cheap dopamine does not just waste time. It weakens your relationship with effort. And once effort starts feeling unbearable, discipline starts feeling unnatural. Then people make a serious mistake. They think the answer is more motivation. No. The answer is better inputs. It's not about inspiration. It's about discipline. It's not about desire. It's about conditioning. It's not about entertainment. It's about control. You have a choice. You can keep letting algorithms, notifications, and impulses dictate the rhythm of your mind. Or you can start reclaiming your internal environment. That reclaiming begins with boredom. Yes, boredom. Because boredom is not your enemy. Boredom is a doorway. On the other side of it are patience, reflection, depth, and concentration. But most people never cross that doorway. The second boredom arrives, they reach for the device, the snack, the noise, the stimulation. And each time they do, They teach themselves the same lesson: I cannot stay here. That lesson becomes weakness. So start relearning boredom. Sit in the room without opening anything. Take a walk without audio. Eat one meal without a screen. Drive without filling every second. Stand in line without pulling out the phone. These sound small. They are not small. They are reps. They teach the nervous system that stillness is survivable, that silence is not danger, that the absence of stimulation is not an emergency. Guard your attention like your future depends on it, because it does. That phrase matters because attention is where all discipline begins. If you cannot hold your attention, you cannot hold your standards. If you cannot hold your attention, you cannot finish difficult work. If you cannot hold your attention, you cannot build depth, mastery, or endurance. Attention comes first. That's the key. And this means you must become more deliberate with your inputs. Not paranoid. Deliberate. Ask hard questions. Why is the phone beside you during deep work? Why is the television on while you eat? Why is there always something playing in the background? Why do you reach for stimulation the moment you feel stress? Why are you treating every uncomfortable emotion as something to be numbed? Because that is what many people are doing. They are not using entertainment. They are using it to avoid themselves. They watch to avoid thinking. They scroll to avoid feeling. They consume to avoid building. They stimulate to avoid confronting the emptiness, fear, or uncertainty underneath. That is why this chapter is not just about productivity. It is about courage. Silence reveals things. Stillness reveals things. Undistracted time reveals things. And weak people often run from that revelation. Do not be one of them. You have a choice. Let the mind stay weak and overstimulated, or retrain it. Here is the practical instruction. Create boundaries around your attention. Set screen-free blocks. Work in silence. Put the phone in another room during focused effort. Do not start the day with instant stimulation. Do not let entertainment be the reward for merely existing. Earn your pleasure after your priorities, not before. And when the urge rises to check, scroll, click, switch, or escape, pause. Do not obey it instantly. That pause is training. Every paused impulse strengthens you. Every indulged impulse weakens you. What you feed grows stronger. You must also stop confusing mental exhaustion with overstimulation. Many people say they are too mentally tired for meaningful work, but they still have energy for scrolling, watching, clicking, and grazing on content for hours. That is not pure exhaustion. That is reward-seeking. Be honest. Easy pleasure makes hard progress feel impossible. So remove some of the easy pleasure. Not forever, but enough to let your mind reset. Enough to let boredom come back. Enough to let focus stretch again. Enough to let patience breathe again. Then something powerful happens. Reading gets easier. Thinking gets deeper. Work gets cleaner. Silence gets less threatening. Your ability to stay improves. That is how mental sharpness returns. Not through hacks. Through restraint. Guard your attention like your future depends on it, because it does. This is the deeper lesson of the book. Willpower is not only about saying yes to hard things. It is also about saying no to the things that make hard things harder. It is about protecting the mind from habits that weaken concentration, fragment intention, and dissolve self-command. Train your body, yes. But train your focus too. Because a distracted mind becomes a weak will. And a guarded mind becomes a dangerous one. You have learned to act before you feel ready. You have learned to embrace discomfort, to strike resistance first, to stop negotiating, and to build identity through repetition. Now you see the battlefield more clearly. Your attention is part of the training. Protect it. Strengthen it. Rule it. Because the next chapter will show you how true power is not built in dramatic bursts, but in something far less glamorous and far more important. Chapter 7. Train consistency, not intensity. Most people do not need a breakthrough. They need a backbone. That is where this chapter begins. Because the fantasy that destroys progress is not always laziness. It is often drama. The love of the dramatic breakthrough. The obsession with the heroic day. The addiction to feeling like this one massive effort will finally change everything. It usually does not. A dramatic day can impress you. It can excite you. It can make you feel serious for a moment. But if it is not followed by repetition, it becomes another emotional event with no lasting power. Intensity impresses. Consistency transforms. That's the key. People want transformation, but they keep chasing intensity. They want the 10-hour work sprint, the extreme diet, the giant declaration, the impossible Monday, the clean restart, the all-or-nothing push that makes them feel powerful. And then what happens? They burn out, or they disappear, or they spend 3 days recovering from the very effort they were so proud of. That is not discipline. That is instability wearing the costume of ambition. You have a choice. You can keep worshipping the heroic mood, or you can build a life on repeatable standards. Because the truth is simple. Your life is not shaped by your biggest day. It is shaped by your most repeated day. That's the key. The student who studies 10 hours once and then collapses for 4 days does not beat the student who studies 90 focused minutes every day. The first student looks more intense. The second student gets the result. Why? Because depth compounds when it is repeated. The same is true with health. The person who crashes into an extreme diet, swears off everything, suffers publicly, and quits 2 weeks later is not more disciplined than the person who eats well for years. One is chasing intensity. The other is building identity. Small done daily defeats big done rarely. Read that again in your mind. Small done daily defeats big done rarely. The problem is that daily effort feels ordinary. It feels unimpressive. It does not give you the same emotional rush as a dramatic overhaul. There is no applause in it. No cinematic music. No sudden reinvention. Just repetition. That is exactly why it works. Because ordinary effort can be sustained. And what can be sustained can transform you. It's not about excitement. It's about discipline. It's not about big moments. It's about stable ones. It's not about intensity. It's about endurance. That's the key. Most people overestimate what one powerful day can do and underestimate what 50 ordinary disciplined days can do. 50 workouts. 50 reading sessions. 50 days of writing. 50 mornings of getting up on time. 50 evenings of not breaking your standards. That changes a person. Not because each day feels heroic. Because together they become a force. And let's be honest. Many people avoid consistency because it is humbling. Intensity lets you feel special. Consistency asks you to be steady. Intensity gives you a story to tell. Consistency gives you a structure to live by. Intensity gets attention. Consistency gets results. You don't need their permission. You do not need an audience for the ordinary days. You do not need people to notice your repetition. You do not need praise for showing up. You do not need every session to feel extraordinary. You need to keep going. That is what disciplined people understand. They stop asking whether the day feels powerful. They ask whether the standard is clear. And then they obey it. Can you still do it when it feels ordinary? That question matters more than most people realize. Because discipline is measured most honestly on boring days, not inspired ones. When you feel fired up, almost anyone can move. When the energy is high, almost anyone can perform. When the motivation is fresh, almost anyone can begin. But what about the flat day? What about the gray morning? What about the average Tuesday? What about the session that feels normal, heavy, unremarkable? What about the day when there is no crisis, no inspiration, no emotional charge, just the task and your word? That is where discipline tells the truth. Can you still do it when it feels ordinary? That's the key. Because if your standards only survive powerful moods, then your standards are weak. They are not standards. They are weather patterns. Strong people do not build around emotional surges. They build around repeatable actions. The writer writes on the quiet day. The athlete trains on the low-energy day. The parent stays calm on the irritating day. The student studies on the dull day. The builder keeps building when progress feels slow. That is how consistency becomes moral. It becomes a way of being, a statement of character. It says, I do not only do what matters when it feels exciting. I do it because it matters. You have a choice. You can keep asking life to inspire you, or you can become dependable without inspiration. That is maturity, not the ability to sprint once, the ability to stay. And this is where many people sabotage themselves. They set standards they cannot sustain. They make plans built for a fantasy version of themselves, then feel ashamed when real life exposes the gap. Do not do that. Build a rhythm you can respect and repeat. 90 clean minutes are better than 10 chaotic hours. A sustainable meal plan is better than an extreme purge. A daily walk is better than an occasional collapse into guilt-driven overtraining. A focused page a day is better than one giant burst followed by silence. Small done daily defeats big done rarely. That phrase is not lowering the bar. It is placing the bar where transformation actually happens. Because repetition beats drama. Rhythm beats intensity. Stability beats mood swings. That's the key. Consistency also protects your identity. Every time you show up again, especially without excitement, you reinforce the kind of person you are. You stop seeing discipline as an event and start seeing it as normal. That is when real change takes root. At first, showing up on ordinary days feels hard. Then it feels respectable. Then it feels expected. Eventually, not showing up starts to feel stranger than showing up. That is when discipline becomes natural. Not easy. Natural. Here is the practical instruction. Stop designing your growth around peak emotion. Design it around repeatability. Ask yourself 3 questions. What can I do consistently even on a flat day? What standard can I maintain without drama? What version of this habit is strong enough to matter and realistic enough to repeat? Then lock it in. A fixed study block. A realistic workout schedule. A writing target you can hit regularly. A sleep pattern that supports consistency instead of chaos. A rule that says progress counts more than performance theater. And once the structure is set, protect it on ordinary days most of all. Can you still do it when it feels ordinary? That is the test. And if the answer is no, then your system may be built on intensity instead of truth. Adjust it. Strip the drama away. Keep the standard. Because the goal is not to occasionally feel unstoppable. The goal is to become reliable. Reliable in private. Reliable when bored. Reliable when flat. Reliable when no one is clapping. That is power. Intensity impresses. Consistency transforms. Never forget that. The person who keeps doing small right things over time becomes nearly unrecognizable from the person who only lunges forward when emotion spikes. One is building a life. The other is collecting false starts. You are not here to collect false starts. You are here to train your willpower like a muscle. And muscles are not built by one glorious workout. They are built by repeated tension, repeated recovery, repeated obedience. That is the deeper lesson of this chapter. Not every day will feel strong. But every day can make you stronger if you keep the standard. The ordinary day is not an interruption to your growth. It is where your growth is decided. Can you still do it when it feels ordinary? Answer that with your behavior. You learn to act before feeling ready. You learn to embrace discomfort, strike resistance first, end negotiation, build identity through repetition, and guard your attention from distraction. Now you understand that real power is built through steady reps, not emotional explosions. Good. Because the next chapter will teach you what to do when the rhythm breaks, when you slip, when you fall short, and when failure tries to convince you that the training is over. Chapter 8. Use failure as resistance training. You will fail. Let's begin there. Not because you are doomed. Not because you are weak. Not because this book does not work. Because you are human. You will miss a day. You will make a bad choice. You will say the wrong thing. You will lose time, lose money, lose focus, lose rhythm. You will fall short of your own standard at times. That is not a prediction of defeat. It is a description of reality. The danger is not failure itself. The danger is what you decide failure means. That's the key. Weak people use failure as a verdict. Strong people use failure as data. One mistake happens, and the weak mind says, "This proves who I am." One setback happens, and the weak mind says, "I knew I couldn't do it." One missed day happens, and the weak mind says, "I've ruined the streak." One embarrassment happens, and the weak mind says, "I should stop trying." That is how people collapse. Not from the mistake. From the story they attach to the mistake. You have a choice. You can turn failure into identity, or you can turn failure into instruction. Failure is not the opposite of training. It is part of training. Say that again in your mind. Failure is not the opposite of training. It is part of training. That sentence matters because too many people imagine discipline as a clean line. Perfect days. Perfect performance. Perfect consistency. No slips. No losses. No ugly moments. No errors. That fantasy is childish. Real discipline is not built in the absence of setbacks. It is built in the response to setbacks. The athlete loses a race. What happens next? A weak athlete makes the loss personal. They turn one bad day into a damaged identity. They replay the embarrassment. They avoid the next challenge. They act as if the loss exposed permanent weakness. A strong athlete studies the loss. Where did the pace break? Where did the focus drop? What can be corrected? Then they return to training. Why? Because they understand something essential. The loss was not the end of training. It was part of training. The founder gets rejected. A weak founder hears, "You are not good enough." A strong founder hears, "Your offer, timing, communication, or positioning needs work." One turns pain into paralysis. The other turns pain into refinement. That's the key. It's not about failure. It's about interpretation. It's not about falling short. It's about discipline. It's not about the mistake. It's about what you do next. The ordinary person slips too, misses the workout, eats the thing they said they would not eat, breaks focus, wastes a day, snaps in anger, avoids the task, falls out of rhythm. Then comes the critical moment. Not the mistake itself. The moment after. Because the moment after failure reveals whether you are training your willpower or just admiring the idea of it. A weak person says, "I already blew it," and makes the next bad choice easier. That is how one mistake becomes a spiral. One skipped workout becomes a skipped week. One bad meal becomes a bad weekend. One wasted hour becomes a wasted day. But a strong person says, "That was a mistake. Correct it now." Fall once, learn once, rise once more. That is the standard. Not perfection. Correction. You don't need their permission. You do not need failure's permission to continue either. You do not need to wait until tomorrow to restart. You do not need a Monday. You do not need a clean month. You do not need a ceremony of self-forgiveness before returning to the standard. You need one thing: return. That's the key. Your strength is revealed in how fast you return, not in whether you never break rhythm. Rhythm will break sometimes. Life is real. Pressure is real. Emotions are real. Fatigue is real. Mistakes are real. But return is also real. And return is trainable. This is where mature discipline separates from fragile discipline. Fragile discipline is enthusiastic when things go well and shattered when things go badly. It depends on the illusion of control. It needs the story of being on track in order to function. Mature discipline is different. It expects friction. It expects imperfection. It expects the occasional blow. And because it expects those things, it is harder to knock off course. Why? Because it has already decided what failure means. Failure means review. Failure means adjustment. Failure means another rep. Failure means return. Failure is not the opposite of training. It is part of training. Remember that. If you miss a day, return the next day. If you make a poor choice, make a better one next. If you lose money, learn what made you careless. If you embarrass yourself, ask what the moment exposed that pride was hiding. If you fall short, get honest, get clear, and get back under the weight. That is how people become strong. Not by floating above failure. By using it. You have a choice. You can use failure as an excuse to retreat into the old self. Or you can use it as resistance training. And that phrase matters. Resistance training. When you lift weights, resistance is not a sign that something has gone wrong. Resistance is the very thing that creates growth. In the same way, when life resists you through setbacks, embarrassment, delay, rejection, and imperfection, that resistance can build you, if you stop treating it like a verdict. That's the key. The pain of failure can sharpen you or soften you. That depends on whether you choose reflection or self-pity. Weak people are often addicted to self-pity because self-pity keeps them innocent. It lets them avoid responsibility. It lets them say, "I feel bad, therefore I do not have to move." No. Feel bad if you need to. But move anyway. Fall once, learn once, rise once more. That is how you break the pattern. And let's be specific. When failure happens, do these 3 things. First, name it cleanly. No drama. No self-hatred. Just truth. I missed the workout. I avoided the call. I overspent. I reacted poorly. I wasted the day. Second, extract the lesson. What caused it? Lack of planning, emotional weakness, fatigue, poor boundaries, overconfidence, dishonesty. Get precise. Third, return quickly. Do not let the lesson sit in theory. Put it into action immediately. Tighten the standard. Adjust the environment. Re-enter the routine. Your strength is revealed in how fast you return. That phrase should live in you, because speed of recovery matters more than speed of collapse. Anyone can collapse. Anyone can lose rhythm. Anyone can get hit. The question is, how long do you stay down? 1 hour, 1 day, 1 month, 1 year. Too many people let one bad moment become a new identity because returning would require humility. Returning would require starting again without the emotional high of a clean beginning. Returning would require accepting that growth is messy. Accept it. Growth is messy. But a messy return is stronger than a polished excuse. It's not about image. It's about discipline. It's not about protecting your ego. It's about protecting your future. It's not about never failing. It's about refusing to live inside failure. That's the key. The strongest people you know are not people who never stumbled. They are people who built a relationship with recovery. They trained themselves to come back quickly, quietly, and without drama. They stopped making failure sacred. They stopped letting it define them. They turned it into information and kept moving. That is the deeper lesson of this chapter. Willpower is not proven only when you are perfect. It is proven when you are imperfect and still refuse to quit. It is proven when shame whispers, "Stop," and you answer with action. It is proven when rhythm breaks and you build it again. It is proven when the fall does not become your home. Failure is not the opposite of training. It is part of training. So use it. Study it. Absorb it. Let it humble you. Let it sharpen you. But do not let it own you. You have learned to begin before feeling ready, choose discomfort, attack resistance, stop negotiating, build identity, guard your attention, and value consistency over drama. Now you know what to do when the line gets messy. Return faster. Recover stronger. Use failure as part of the training. Good. Because the next chapter is about something many people never master. Not just starting with force, but carrying effort all the way to the end. Chapter 9. Become someone who finishes. Starting is praised too much. Finishing is respected too little. That is where this chapter begins. Because many people know how to begin with emotion. They know how to announce a goal. They know how to make a plan. They know how to create excitement, gather tools, speak with conviction, and launch with energy. But then what? Then the energy dips. The work becomes repetitive. The task becomes heavier than expected. The novelty disappears. The resistance changes shape. And suddenly the person who started with fire begins disappearing into excuses. That is the pattern. Half-read books. Half-built businesses. Half-finished projects. Half-kept promises. Half-lived lives. This is not a small weakness. This is a serious character issue. Because every time you leave something unfinished without a real reason, you train the mind to normalize incompletion. You train the nervous system to associate effort with retreat. You become a person who begins emotionally and exits quietly. A strong mind closes loops. That's the key. Strong people do not just generate momentum. They carry weight to the end. They understand that completion has power far beyond the task itself. Finishing is not just about getting things done. It is about building an identity that can be trusted under pressure. You have a choice. You can keep collecting starts. Or you can become someone who finishes. And those are very different lives. The first life feels busy. The second life builds power. Completion builds power. Read that again in your mind. Completion builds power. Why? Because unfinished things drain you. They take up space in the mind. They sit in the background. They whisper. They remind you of what you avoided, delayed, abandoned, or softened. They become open loops, and open loops have weight. That unfinished chapter whispers, you fade when focus drops. That unfinished workout whispers, you stop when discomfort rises. That unfinished conversation whispers, you prefer relief over truth. That unfinished project whispers, you like the idea more than the burden. And if enough of those whispers collect, they become identity. That's the key. It's not about productivity. It's about self-belief. It's not about crossing things off a list. It's about discipline. It's not about being busy. It's about being trustworthy. Every completed task sends a different signal. I can carry this. I do not disappear halfway. I can endure the boring middle. I can stay when the emotion leaves. That signal matters, because the nervous system is always learning who you are from what you repeatedly do at the end of things, not just the beginning. Most people underestimate the middle and the end. They think the hard part is starting. Sometimes it is. But often the harder part is continuing after the excitement dies and finishing after the task becomes ordinary, frustrating, or imperfect. The workout that starts strong and turns mediocre. The chapter that begins clearly and gets harder halfway through. The business idea that feels exciting until systems, repetition, and rejection enter the room. The relationship conversation that is easy until honesty costs comfort. That is where character gets exposed. Do not just begin with fire. End with force. That phrase matters because too many people are addicted to emotional ignition. They love the spark. They do not respect the carry. They admire beginnings and neglect endings. But beginnings are cheap. Endings cost something. They cost patience. They cost endurance. They cost humility. They cost the willingness to continue when the task no longer flatters you. That is why finishing builds such deep strength. It is psychological endurance. It is the ability to remain under the burden long enough to complete the rep. You don't need their permission. You do not need perfect conditions to finish either. You do not need the workout to feel amazing to finish it. You do not need the writing session to feel inspired to finish the page. You do not need the conversation to feel comfortable to tell the truth. You do not need the project to feel exciting to bring it across the line. You need steadiness. A strong mind closes loops. Let that settle into you. Because open loops do more damage than people admit. They weaken confidence in quiet ways. They make you slightly more doubtful the next time you set a goal. They make you a little less convinced by your own promises. They create a subtle identity of incompletion. And then people ask, why do I not believe in myself? Because you have evidence against yourself. That's the key. Self-belief is not built by hype. It is built by completion. Finish the workout, even if the second half is ugly. Finish the chapter, even if your focus fades. Finish the application, even if you fear rejection. Finish the room, the call, the task, the plan, the rep. Do not make a habit of leaving what matters half done. Now let's be clear. Finishing does not mean mindless perfectionism. It does not mean refusing to adapt, refusing to rest, or clinging to something dead out of ego. That is not strength. That is rigidity. This chapter is about something else. It is about not abandoning meaningful effort simply because the emotional reward disappeared. It's not about perfectionism. It's about discipline. It's not about never adjusting. It's about not quitting cheaply. It's not about forcing everything forever. It's about carrying worthy things to completion. You have a choice. You can stop when the task stops flattering you. Or you can train the part of you that stays. That staying changes a person. The runner who finishes the final stretch when the body is flat becomes different. The student who finishes the study block when the material gets dull becomes different. The parent who finishes the hard conversation with honesty becomes different. The builder who completes the project after the initial excitement dies becomes different. Why? Because completion is a message. It says, I do not exist only for beginnings. I can carry weight all the way through. Completion builds power. That is not just about tasks. It is about your nervous system learning endurance. Every finish teaches you that discomfort does not have to end the effort. Every finish teaches you that boredom does not cancel the mission. Every finish teaches you that your standards remain even after the mood leaves. That's the key. And here is the practical instruction. Start smaller if you must, but finish what you start. Do fewer things, but close more loops. Instead of beginning 5 weak commitments, complete one strong one. Instead of starting 3 books, finish the one in your hand. Instead of planning 10 projects, choose one and carry it through the messy middle. Instead of talking about the conversation, have it. Finish it. Say the true thing. Build the habit of closure. At the end of the workout, do not drift away emotionally. Complete the final set. At the end of the work block, do not abandon the last rep because energy dropped. Complete the task you committed to. At the end of the day, close one loop before you go numb in distraction. Train yourself to dislike unnecessary incompletion. Not from anxiety, from pride. A strong mind closes loops. And when you cannot finish everything, because life is real and priorities matter, finish the right things. Completion is not about doing all things. It is about honoring the things that deserve to be carried. So ask yourself better questions. What have I been leaving open because finishing would require more of me? What task have I mistaken as boring when it is actually building endurance? Where am I addicted to the thrill of starting but allergic to the burden of finishing? Be honest. Because many people are not failing from lack of talent. They are failing from lack of closure. They begin with force and fade in silence. Do not be that person. Do not just begin with fire. End with force. That is how willpower becomes visible. Not only in initiation, but in completion. Not only in courage at the start, but in endurance at the end. Not only in making promises, but in carrying them. Completion builds power. Never forget that. Every closed loop becomes evidence. Evidence that you can be trusted with difficulty. Evidence that you do not stop at friction. Evidence that you can carry a standard all the way to the line. That is the deeper lesson of this book. Willpower is not merely the ability to begin hard things. It is the ability to stay with them, survive the dull middle, and finish without needing applause, novelty, or perfect feelings. That is real strength. That is trained strength. You have learned to start before feeling ready, embrace discomfort, attack resistance first, stop negotiating, build identity, protect attention, stay consistent, and recover from failure. Now you are learning to close loops and become someone who finishes. Good. Because there is one final lesson above them all. The highest form of discipline is not just finishing tasks. It is learning to live under self-command. Chapter 10. Live by command, not by mood. This is the final lesson. The highest form of freedom is not doing whatever you feel like doing. It is being able to feel everything and still choose what you will do. That is freedom. Not impulse. Not indulgence. Not convenience. Not emotional drift. Freedom begins where self-command begins. That is where this chapter begins, and that is where this entire book has been leading. Because many people are not free at all. They look free. They have options. They have comfort. They have privacy. They have entertainment. They have flexibility. But inside, they are ruled. Ruled by moods. Ruled by cravings. Ruled by fear. Ruled by convenience. Ruled by whatever feeling speaks the loudest in the moment. That is not freedom. That is dependence with better marketing. That's the key. A person who must obey every passing emotion is not in charge of their life. They are a passenger. And the problem with being ruled by moods is that moods are unstable. They change by the hour. They respond to sleep, stress, weather, memory, attention, hormones, conflict, and hunger. If your behavior rises and falls with every internal shift, then your life becomes fragile. You have a choice. You can keep living reactively, bowing to whatever you feel in the moment, or you can train yourself to live by command. That is what this whole audiobook is about. Not becoming emotionless. Becoming directed. Feel everything. Obey only what matters. Say that clearly in your mind. Feel everything. Obey only what matters. That phrase matters because weak people often misunderstand discipline. They think a strong person feels nothing. No fear. No frustration. No temptation. No fatigue. No resistance. Wrong. Strong people feel all of it. They just do not kneel to it. That's the difference. The reactive person feels irritation in conflict and immediately lashes out. The trained person feels the same irritation, but chooses restraint. The reactive person feels tired and uses that feeling to cancel the standard. The trained person feels tired and adjusts if needed without abandoning the mission. The reactive person feels the urge to escape and reaches for the phone, the food, the noise, the purchase, the distraction. The trained person feels the urge and lets the urge pass without becoming its servant. That is self-command, not the absence of pressure. Mastery inside pressure. Freedom begins where self-command begins. Read that again in your mind, because many people are chasing the wrong kind of freedom. They think freedom means removing all structure, all rules, all pressure, all discipline. But what usually happens when a person has no structure and no command? They drift. They overconsume. They procrastinate. They break promises. They avoid discomfort. They waste time. They lose sharpness. They confuse desire with direction. Then they call it freedom. No. It is not freedom when your impulses own you. It's not about comfort. It's about discipline. It's not about options. It's about command. It's not about feeling free. It's about being able to choose the right action under pressure. That's the key. The person ruled by mood always has an explanation. I was stressed. I was tired. I wasn't feeling it. It was a bad day. I just needed a break. I'll get back on track later. The person ruled by command has standards. I said I would do it. This matters, so I act. I can feel this without obeying it. My word does not collapse because my mood changed. That is power. Not loud power. Not performative power. Private power. The power to remain steady when the inside of you is noisy. You don't need their permission. You do not need your mood's permission either. You do not need fear to disappear before speaking truth. You do not need calm feelings before acting with discipline. You do not need confidence before keeping a promise. You do not need desire before doing what is right. You need command. And real command is revealed in ordinary life. When conflict appears, do you stay calm or become reactive? When fatigue appears, do you adjust wisely or abandon the standard entirely? When temptation appears, do you pause or obey instantly? When pressure rises, do you break your word or keep it? That is where freedom is decided. Feel everything. Obey only what matters. That is how a mature person lives. Not by denying emotion. By refusing to let emotion become law. Now let's make the contrast clear. There are two identities. The first is the reactive person. This person wakes up and immediately checks how they feel. Their mood becomes the forecast for their behavior. If they feel motivated, they move. If they feel flat, they delay. If they feel offended, they react. If they feel pressure, they escape. If they feel desire, they indulge. If they feel fear, they retreat. They are not evil. They are untrained. Their life becomes inconsistent because their ruler is inconsistent. Then there is the trained person. This person also feels moods, also feels cravings, also feels fear, also feels friction. But they have practiced something stronger than impulse. They have standards. They have rules. They have inner command. So they can say, I feel anger, but I will speak with control. I feel tired, but I will still complete what matters. I feel temptation, but I will not betray the standard. I feel fear, but I will still act with principle. That is strength. That's the key. And understand this, willpower is not only for one goal, not only for getting in shape, not only for building a business, not only for reading more or waking early. Willpower is for building a life that can hold pressure without collapsing. That is the real purpose. A life that can absorb stress without becoming chaotic. A life that can face temptation without becoming weak. A life that can endure boredom without needing escape. A life that can carry responsibility without resentment. A life that can stay aligned when feelings shift. That is a serious life. That is a trained life. Your life changes when your word becomes law. Say that again. Your life changes when your word becomes law. Because once your word becomes law to yourself, everything changes. Your routines become cleaner. Your decisions become simpler. Your energy becomes steadier. Your confidence becomes earned. Your identity becomes stronger. Why? Because there is no longer confusion about who leads. You do. Not your cravings. Not your weather. Not your fear. Not your comfort. Not your distractions. You have a choice. You can keep living from emotional reaction to emotional reaction. Or you can build a structure inside yourself that holds when the day gets heavy. That structure is standards. Wake when you said you would wake. Train when you said you would train. Tell the truth when it would be easier to hide. Do priority work before cheap relief. Stay calm when conflict invites chaos. Finish what matters when mood invites retreat. This is not punishment. This is self-respect in action. And over time, something powerful happens. Discipline stops feeling like a constant fight. Not because life stops testing you, but because your standards become more automatic. Your identity becomes more stable. You no longer debate every rep. You no longer consult every mood. You no longer need a dramatic speech to do basic things. Discipline becomes a way of being. That is the goal. Not endless struggle. Not theatrical toughness. Not robotic coldness. Quiet command. Steady command. Reliable command. Freedom begins where self-command begins. Never forget that. This entire book has been training you toward that truth. You learned to stop waiting to feel ready. You learned that comfort can make you weak. You learned to hit resistance first, stop negotiating with yourself, build identity through repetition, protect your attention, value consistency over intensity, use failure as training, and become someone who finishes. All of it points here. To a life ruled by standards instead of moods. To a mind that can feel pressure without surrendering to it. To a person whose word means something. Feel everything. Obey only what matters. That is the final standard. Because the strongest life is not the easiest one. It is the one led from within. The one where discipline is no longer a temporary effort, but a permanent structure. The one where your actions stop asking your emotions for permission. The one where your word becomes law, and your life begins to reflect it. You did not train your willpower for one moment. You trained it for a way of living. And now that you understand the path, there is only one question left. Will you command yourself, or will you continue being commanded by whatever you feel next? This is the truth. Your willpower will never grow by being admired, discussed, planned, or posted about. It grows when you use it. It grows when you get up tired and move anyway. It grows when you refuse comfort, reject negotiation, protect your attention, repeat what matters, recover from failure, and finish what you start. That is how inner strength is built. Not in theory. In reps. In friction. In ordinary moments where nobody is watching and every excuse is available. So from this moment on, stop asking whether you feel motivated. Stop asking whether it is the perfect time. Stop asking whether it will be easy. Ask one question only: what must be done now? Then do it. Do it badly if you must. Do it slowly if you must. But do it. And here is your challenge. Before this day ends, choose one hard thing you have been delaying and finish it without negotiation. Let that be your first rep. Let that be the day your mind learns who is in charge.